So let's move over to Keekihime, right? You guys want to go that way. So, of course, if you guys don't know her, she is a fairly well-known cosplayer, and still very involved in this. This is her Kiki cosplay over here. Cosplayer from Austria, right? So it's all of her cosplay over here. She does some really good cosplays, including some, I think her most famous is Asuka from Neon Genesis Evangelion. But she's done some really good cosplays here. Pretty well-known cosplayer, nothing spicy. I mean, this is just like regular, like standard cosplay, but pretty good here, pretty good stuff. And she was also formerly a member of the idol group Tone Jewel. Now, a really funny thing about the Miss Cake Princess here is that a lot of Japanese don't understand that Austria is a country, so they call her Australian. So it's very funny. And actually, I remember the first country I went to, my first girlfriend was from Austria, and one of the hats they sold in Austria was like, "Welcome to Austria, we don't have kangaroos," right, or something like that. It was really funny. It was a good hat. It was really, really good hat. But yes, not the kangaroo one, the the opera one. Okay, Habsburgs and opera. Okay, get it right. All right. So, anyways, we got Keekihime. She was an idol for a while. Of course, as an idol, they collect a certain amount of followers, right? And they obviously have fans. And of course, Keekihime, our cake princess, is no exception to this. She indeed collected a stalker. Now, she had been stalked by this stalker multiple times, actually twice before this went down. So she had been coming to Japan to take photos with her fans before, and this particular stalker had caused an incident, had followed her, and she had to talk to the police in order to get separated from the stalker. And then she proceeded to, go about and separate herself and go about her day. So it's a big problem. And one of the things I want to get to is the legal problem with it, particularly for foreigners visiting Japan. And this can also happen with other countries as well. This is not unique to Japan, but this is one of the bad things about idol culture in some respects. And we can reflect this on with VTubers as well, is it can create parasocial relationships. I don't think you guys need me to explain what a parasocial relationship is, but I'll just give a quick summary as essentially feeling like you know somebody in a way you don't. She's totally my girl, my wife, my BFF, and she doesn't even know what your face looks like. She doesn't know about you at all. She knows nothing about you. You like her, you may be interested in her, but you make the false assumption that you have this familiarity that you really don't. And it is a little bit normal for there to be a certain level of that with this sort of medium of communication. There's 1,000 of you in the chat right now that know me a hell of a lot better than I know you. But, once again, I can try to do my best to pay attention to people. I remember my OGs in the chat. I try to remember the members, but obviously, when you're on this side of the screen, there's only so much you can do to absorb information versus the other way. So it's a more of a one-sided flow of information. So when someone shows up and they're like, "Hey, Andrew, will you wear the Oscar costume for me?" I mean, I might be a little bit weirded out. I might be a little weirded out. That was how Meme Copium actually approached me for the first time. He asked me to. He's like, "Get in the robot, Andrew." I'm joking. But that said, she went to, I believe it is Comiket, which is a very, very big convention in Japan, which I need to get to. In fact, I put on my docket, if I can get to this convention in the future, I will go, which would be pretty awesome. In fact, maybe I'll bring Josh with me. Josh says the idol industry in Japan is particularly bad. They foster the idea the idol is the fan's girlfriend, and they get punished for being caught in real relationships. And that's the problem. That's one thing that builds stalkers. It builds these like unicorns. It builds this this sort of mentality that they're this perfect, untouched, unspoiled, virgin that's just waiting for you to sweep them off their feet, right? So this incident went down at Comiket. Now I'm going to play the video from Muji, and he's a really good gangster here, putting together some really good videos. And shout out to him. We're just going to play maybe 5 minutes or less of the video because I want him to get into what happened and then the consequences of this third stalking incident. If you haven't seen this, this is very recent. This was in August. So this is very, very, very recent. Yes, he's a very base lad, Mujin. And I do recommend you go by and give him a like and give him a subscribe and all that.
The crowd. A familiar man that had been haunting her for over 10 years showed up right behind her.
So you could see his like part of his body there, and there's another shot where you can see his face. It kind of gets closer.
She had just posed in this area. The photographer had just barely pulled out his camera, ready to take the first picture. This is when her stalker would jump the barrier behind her. She felt this happen and thought to herself, wow, this person must be in a hurry if they had to jump the barrier like that. But she was too focused on posing for the camera. And then before she knew it, I mean, she can barely recall this, she was grabbed from the back, tightly squeezing across her entire...
Now this looks, let me just be real with you guys. This looks fucking terrifying. Like, I put myself in her shoes, you know, and be like, if I was a girl who's like maybe 3/4 the size, 75% of the size, and skinny, and some big fat fuck comes up and like grabs you like that from behind, that's fucking terrifying. That is absolutely fucking terrifying, right? And look at the look on his face. You know, he's like cooming right here, you know, doing this. It's fucking crazy as shit. And just once again, running up, jumping, and doing that, right? Jumping over and doing that. Crazy fucker, right? And now I'm going to explain what happens here and why it's difficult to prosecute him. Because in the US, this would be very prosecutable for sure. Are you fucking kidding me? For sure, this would be prosecutable. And even if this was a Japanese girl, this would be more able to be prosecuted. But because it is a foreign girl and a Japanese guy, this is difficult. And this is one of the bad things. It's a tough thing about Japan. I'm going to explain why. But let's listen up here.
Entire body. Her stalker had effectively jumped on her. He is significantly bigger than her and had her completely trapped in his arms. What's even more creepy and disgusting about this picture is that you can see him clearly grinning, probably enjoying.
He is 100% enjoying this. This is his version of gooning, right?
Enjoying this. She was absolutely caught by surprise here and was screaming her lungs out. She said that she was screaming so loud that the people 200 meters away from her could hear her. This was her worst fear come true. According to her, it felt like an eternity, but he ended up holding her maybe for around a full 10 seconds. Eyewitnesses around her report that they were also very confused, thinking, wait, is this a friend of hers? Like, what's going on? But after those...
And so that's an important fact. So let's stop right there for a second. That's an important fact. So an important fact here is that with a stalker, you get people that are going to ask the question, is this a friend, right? Is this somebody they know? And what would a stalker say? Well, of course, a stalker is going to say, oh, well, we're in a relationship. Because first of all, they're fucking delusional. They probably truly believe their friends or boyfriends are connected. So they probably truly believe that they have a relationship with this person. So they're gonna say, oh no, I'm not a stranger. I have emails, I talk to them. This is consensual, right? Because they're that crazy. If you're at the point where you're stalking somebody, you're that crazy. You genuinely believe that you are not a stranger to them. And we're gonna talk about this. What is one thing that would make an assault or battery not necessarily a crime? If it's consensual, or between two consenting parties, or two parties that are in a relationship, right? And you'd have to prove, no, this was not consensual. We do not have this, right? This is not agreed upon. This is not playing around. You have to prove that factor, right? Now, there's a lot of evidence here. Clearly, there's some pushback here, but she would have to testify. It's not something they could get. It's not something they can discern without getting her statements and her side of that story, right? They would need her to come and provide that. So that's an important fact. Just put a pin in that because we're going to talk about how it's difficult for her to prosecute this.
Ventilating, tearing up, crying. She was practically having a panic attack. This is a recording of the aftermath. After he had groped her the way he did, this is what happens. Watch, then I'll explain.
And also shout out to the base bros who like came up and like stood up and get in between and you know, create distance. That's good stuff. That's good people. Obviously, if you see this happening, you know, you need to get up and you need to stand up and you need to get out there. And yes, this is not white knighting. This is being a decent person. If someone's screaming for their life, that's not white knighting. What I consider white knighting is if you insert yourself in a situation that you got no fucking business to be part of, right? That's a much different thing. Someone in a criminal situation, that's not white knighting, just to make clear. I saw somebody in the chat say that. Not white knighting. This is helping in a proper way.
So at this point, people are confused. They're questioning him, like, yo, what's going on right now? And she tells everyone that, hey, this is my stalker. He's been doing this for years. And this guy has the gall to act shocked. He says things like, but I've been emailing you. I've been sending you messages all the time. I'm just a very big fan. We know each other.
See, this is the mentality. That's the problem is, you know, oh, we're fans. Oh yeah, it's all going to be good, right? You know, because we know each other, right? We know each other. It's all good. It's all great. That's the typical. That's the other side of it. So you have to be able to rebut that and say, no, absolutely bullshit. That's wrong. I will testify that they're lying. We have no relationship. I'll show you the evidence. I'll show you the Carfax. This was not consensual. Let's continue.
To her, she made a Twitter space 55 minutes long in which she explained everything from start to finish, and it's the main source that was used for this entire video. She details how the staff of Komikit were fairly supportive, but when she said she wanted to call the police, they said you have to do that outside the expo.
Yeah, and once again, this is where the bad about Japan. Police equals much shame for the expo, right? So they don't want them calling the police to show up to like make it look like the whole thing is a crime scene because we get weirded out and start doing stuff. This is where the face saving comes in and the image and everything else. So this is where it starts to get the badder side of how Japan handles these sort of things versus the US, which would 100% just call for you, right? The police are in fact probably already there. There's probably an undercover cop at the convention, right? So like in all the conventions I've gone to, the bigger ones, Colossal Con, Dragon Con, etc., they've all had MegaCon. They've all had plenty of cops.
She definitely wanted to talk to the police about this because she quite literally got assaulted, but she opted to finish taking pictures with the photographers she hadn't seen for years first before talking to the police. She said the police officer she spoke to was very understanding and very nice to her, but he pretty much told her what she had said in her post. He said, we can't do anything because you're not a resident of Japan, and that she should...
Okay, so let me stop there. So that is very typical of the experience in maybe like a lot of Asian police stations and stuff, where they'll be very nice, but they'll nicely tell you no, right? They'll be very nice about it. They'll be like, oh, yes, sorry, or sorry. But they'll say no, right? They'll be like, you know, we apologize for the inconvenience, but no, right? Very nice, but it's a no. And so stalking, the way the stalking statute works, let me see if I have it pulled up here. The way the stalking works is generally related to either sending messages, right? Because they added a provision related to making silent calls, transmitting. Let me show this real quick. They added a provision in the Anti-Stalking Act that was related to making calls, text messaging, doing that against a person, a spouse, or lineal bloodline relatives, or anybody in close relationship for the purpose of satisfying one's affection, including romantic feelings. Let me maximize this. Towards any person or fulfilling a grudge when said affection is unrequited. So essentially, this was added to the Anti-Stalking Act. So that was kind of bolstering that one. But most of the stalking provisions, the other stalking provisions, relate to your residence and coming to your residence. So because she does not have a residence in Japan, she lives in Austria, Österreich, right? She cannot be stalked in the sense of someone coming to her residence because it looks at it from the sense of coming to your residence. That's a big problem there. All right. So let's get right here to the extra law, the other law that he talks about involving assault in Japan.
should go to her embassy, to the Austrian embassy, to report this. That way, when and if it happens again, she can go to the police and say, hey, this happened, and my embassy can confirm that I already reported it once before. Very weird, wouldn't you say? Article 208 of the—
And that's probably because they're not going to keep records of it. So there's no there's no local. So she doesn't have a home location. And as you may know, in Korea and Japan, having a place you're living is required. And you always have to update that and kind of tell them where you're living and, kind of stay in a certain area. Where you're living is important, right? So it's probably difficult to track that down from a paperwork standpoint. So they're like, okay, we need you to put this on record with the embassy, then we'll have somewhere we can cross-reference with, to say, oh, okay, they're maintaining these records of the stalking, so we can go back there and turn to those records. That, once again, procedural problems that Japan needs to sort out with its system, because this is going to be a problem, especially for foreigners, and especially as there's more foreigners in the country, right? They need to accommodate for this. Okay, let's talk about assault here.
Penal Code Act number 45 of 1907 clearly states when a person assaults another person without injuring the other person, which is exactly what happened. This was assault in every way. The person is punished by imprisonment for not more than 2 years, a fine of not more than 300,000 yen, penal detention, or a petty fine.
Okay, let me stop here. So Mujin is right in reading this, but he's also right in that what we looked at was clearly a situation where there is an assault. However, what is an element of assault? An element of assault is proving that the contact was a non-consensual contact, right? So what do you need for that? It's a he said versus she said, right? So he's going to say, and he was saying that it was consensual. She's going to say it's not. So they're going to need her to come in, testify, all that jazz. That's really difficult when you're not in Japan, right? From a prosecution standpoint, right? Looking at that. So I can see why they wouldn't want to move forward with necessarily assault, because from an evidentiary standard, that might be really difficult to prove. If the victim was Japanese, if she was a Japanese woman, they can just bring her in at any other time, right? They can bring her in at any other time. But that's from a practical standpoint, it's very difficult. And it's difficult to keep up with a foreigner once they leave the country, and you need to follow up and get testimony from them, get sworn statements. How are you going to do that if they're in Austria? They're not going to send Japanese police to Austria to collect evidence on this. That's not how countries work, right? So from a practical standpoint, the enforcement is an issue, right? And once again, this is an issue where the law needs to be updated to deal with digital stalking, to deal with the sort of stalking, and really deal with foreigners that are in the country, because there's a significant portion of them, right? And protect those rights. It's actually something that Japan could be lobbied to improve, and they have improved the statute in the past. So I believe that they would improve it. But yes, someone asked in the chat, she's Austrian, not Japanese. She's 0% Japanese. She does not have a Japanese passport. She doesn't even live in Japan. Like Meme Copium, Josh, he's not Japanese, but he lives in Japan. So his standing would be a lot different, right? Would be a lot different. So that's why that did not work out for her. Now, that said, and I'll conclude there, obviously, following up with that, there was people who went out and took down his Twitter, got him kind of exposed there. But it's something that hopefully we can add some positive light on, and I'm happy to add to a Twitter campaign to get that kind of worked on, to get that moved, and also not even just that, but to get the information out there that the Japanese law needs a little bit of an update.